Thanks for joining us for the Bioarchitecture Primer. I've been doing natural building and design and owner builder coaching for over 20 years. Realized that cob building was a complete no-brainer solution for the world, environmental reasons, personal expression, building your own house, sculptural buildings. I design buildings for people and I help them design their own buildings. I help them through the construction process. And I'm also building envelope consultant in the commercial construction world. I felt like it was important, just for legal reasons, to put a disclaimer here. For this particular workshop, this is for educational purposes only. I do ceramics, I do various artworks, multimedia artworks. I'm also a musician. So what is natural building? To me, natural building it's a modern movement based on the other traditional ways of building. So it's not one particular thing. It's not one particular set of methods or materials. It's regional. So it'd be vernacular styles. You can say idiosyncratic. So it's very particular to what materials you have on hand, the place you're in, the climate, the people, and so on. And the ethics behind it, is very important. We value the people, the social aspect, the relationships, the environment, the animals and the plants and the earth itself, prioritizing health and beauty and empowerment for people who are using the buildings and building them and designing them. So, talking about just valuing the process of creating a building or designing a building and creating it, or even creating anything, how much can you enjoy the process? That's kind of my question. Partly why I got into cob was that it's just so darn fun. Even though it's very slow, it can just be so enjoyable that you don't even really notice. You want to get back into the mud and you want to do it more. When the building's over, a lot of people have expressed the same thing. They finish their building and they're actually sad that it's done. They have to start a new project. So valuing the process. There's a really good book by William Copperthwaite called A Handmade Life. And in there, he says a lot of really interesting things, very beautiful philosophy. But he talks in particular in one section about the axe versus the chainsaw, and when is it appropriate to use an axe and when is it appropriate to use a chainsaw? And what he says, and I kind of tend to agree with him sometimes, is that for the homeowner, for the person who's just trying to live a beautiful, simple, peaceful life, the chainsaw is a little bit overkill for a lot of things. Unless you're cutting down a bunch of trees, an axe is a wonderful tool. Elegant, it's simple, easy to maintain. You don't have to go to the hardware store all the time to maintain this. So that's just a metaphor for the larger picture, is that we don't always need machinery. It's nice for certain things, but keeping things simple is always very good. It's very elegant that way. So in natural building, to me, really connotes, the connotation is passive solar and using appropriate technology. So we'll get more into those things, but clearly, when we're talking about valuing the social aspect and the environment, this is intimately tied with the ethics of permaculture, people care and earth care and fair share. So the ethics to me is pretty paramount in this whole discussion. So what is bioarchitecture? Bioarchitecture is really what I've been working toward all these years. I just didn't call it that necessarily. I was intuitively working toward this, what we call biomimetic, mimicking nature, biomimicry, right? Being inspired by the design of nature itself. I mean, truly, us humans, we don't come up with anything. We just mimic the beauty of the natural designs that we see around us. So we're incorporating that into all of our designs in all aspects of the work, um, including the relationships, including the design, including the construction process at all scales. In bioarchitecture, we talk a lot about how the materials and the forms can actually affect the consciousness and health of the occupants of a building. Um, so we talk about architecture as frozen music. And I think that's a very true and practical statement. It's not just poetic. So, there are essentially certain pathways as we mimic nature. We find certain pathways in structure and form and materials that are more efficient, and they promote the flows of energies and electrical energy and magnetic energy in such a way that it really promotes the the development of the human being. So this is something we're going to get a lot more into, and I'm really excited about this. Okay, and then for me, I think one of the important parts about this particular course is that I didn't see a lot of people out there in the world kind of integrating all the best practices, bringing in all the different things of what I would want to see in, say, my ideal home. And to me, that's integrating the natural building, permaculture, design aspects, the bioarchitecture, science of all that, and then also working with the more modern and more recent editions of passive house. So passive house is actually a movement that the term was coined and it came out of Germany. And now, in my opinion, it's been kind of co-opted and maybe transformed a bit and a little bit perverted here in the United States. But the original movement coming out of Germany, I think, has what I'm looking for personally. And that would still include breathing walls, which is an important aspect of the main theme of what we're talking about today, actually. But some of the other important best practices checklist, let's say, of passive house are the continuous insulation, no thermal bridges, the building being airtight, having performance windows and doors, having a continuous exchange of fresh air, using heat recovery ventilation or energy recovery ventilation. We'll get into that. Okay, those two things are slightly different, but the diagram in front of you essentially summarizes what an HRV or ERV, as they're known, can do. And it's, pulling in fresh air from outside, expelling stale air from inside, while crossing them over each other without touching each other, kind of like a radiator in a car. Okay, so then using fans, they're able to exchange all that heat and sometimes some of the moisture as well, so that the fresh air coming in isn't cold and isn't too dry and isn't too wet, but you have a continuous fresh air. And then that's kind of an important thing. And I think some of this new technology like that is, a huge advantage over what, say, our ancestors had, or, what people generally used in historical times. So there's also, the orientation of the building, the form, again, not forgetting the passive solar and solar gain, shading, managing the moisture in the building, efficient water heating. I mean, the list goes on, but you get the idea.
What's a thermal bridge?
Great question. Thermal bridging is essentially when you have like a high density object, usually a stud in a wall, like a piece of wood, or it could be metal. And that material that it's made of tends to conduct heat from the inside to the outside of the building, or vice versa. And if you have a wall right between yourself and the outside environment, the purpose of the building is to like keep you comfortable, right? So that insulation in your wall is trying to keep you comfortable, but sometimes you get studs or other objects that will thermally bridge, and they'll be essentially bleeding heat to the outside. And there are ways to design around that so we don't bleed heat, or cool, either way. We don't lose our the functionality of our insulation as much when we design to eliminate thermal breaks. Does that make sense? Okay, so just to kind of get the stage set really properly here, my vision for this course is for you guys to just be inspired and just keep learning. After we finish this course, you will hopefully buy a whole bunch of books and continue talking to other people, taking courses, talking to each other, helping each other with your projects, and just to keep moving, avoiding analysis paralysis, because I think the main thing that tends to kind of slow people down, myself included, is there's just so much information there. And especially now, we got the internet, we got all the information. It's like you could continually absorb information forever, but you need to at some point say, okay, well, I need to take action, and I'm going to take what I know now, it's enough, and I'm going to try to move forward with this in a way that makes sense for me. So that's what I'm trying to do, inspire you guys to some action as well. I want to keep it so that you can work on your own designs, and keep things affordable and simple for yourselves. I think being able to talk intelligently about some of the basics of your own building design will save you a lot of money ultimately. So this course is a good investment. It's all about holistic design. So holistic to me is like, okay, well, that's everything. It's holistic, right? So it's pretty neat, really, to realize that anything that we know or we've experienced in our life can come to bear into the design of your home, let's say, because if you're using holistic design, it's your experience, a lot of factors, so there's not just an engineering type conception, and we're not just using a more intuitive type approach. We're combining all of those together to be holistic. So I sometimes describe it as like yin thinking and yang thinking. So we're using the left and the right hemispheres of our brain at once, which is really the ultimate state, right? So even going through a holistic design process is something that is improving oneself, and it's practicing using your whole being. So we're also going to go into pattern language. If you're not familiar, Christopher Alexander was a professor at University of Oregon for many, many years, and he wrote some really influential books that I love called Pattern Language and The Timeless Way of Building. And so when you look at that, and we'll talk more about it, but really what it comes down to me is it's kind of like anthropology, right? Going back to anthropology, you're looking at the patterns of the people. Like, what do people do, and what are these timeless patterns that you see in towns and cities and neighborhoods and homes? And once you get a few of those patterns and you understand them, then it becomes your vocabulary. So each pattern is sort of like a word in this language of architecture. So we're just going to develop our vocabulary, and it's okay to start with just a few words, So obviously, also including building science. Building science is also kind of part of that pattern language and vocabulary. And then remembering, of course, the permaculture ethos. I mentioned this: people care, earth care, fair share, the problem as the solution, redundancy, stacking functions, and self-maintaining systems. There's more in the list, but these are some of the main things that, we could apply this to designing anything and it will really improve. So we're using the permaculture design principles to design what we would call in permaculture the zone zero, which is the house, the middle, the zone zero. Like redundancy is when you have multiple elements that serve the same function. And then stacking functions is when you have multiple functions from the same element. So stacking functions, like when you have like a Swiss Army knife and it does different things, and redundancy, let's say if you have like a heating system and you have a fireplace. Well, there's two options. But yeah, we're looking at Tyler Smith coming up really soon here today, building envelope consultant. He's a licensed engineer. He works with BE Consulting or E Consulting. He's got over 15 years of experience as a building envelope consultant, solving complex problems encountered in building enclosures. So it's pretty cool now, since I became a building envelope consultant a few years ago, Tyler and I have a lot more to talk about, and I realized how much technical knowledge there is to gain from him and just being a consultant. I really gained a lot from that, and so we're really blessed to have him here today. He's like basically a senior guy in this field, and after that, this afternoon we'll have George Swanson, who's building biologist. He's got tons of experience. He basically helps people who have, mold poisoning and multiple chemical sensitivities. He helps save their lives essentially by, moving to a different home, getting a more healthy home, or remodeling the home they're in so that it can actually be healthy. So he's an expert in breathable walls and the materials that facilitate those design details. Ian Andre is another good friend of mine. He's an assistant for this particular course. He and I have been doing a lot of experiments recently with aircrete and magnesium cement. It's going to knock your socks off, guys. The magnesium cement thing, and then Manuel Roman, another very good friend of mine, is assisting with this course. He goes by Manny. He's going to come through possibly later today and do a little presentation about a straw clay building that he's working on. And he's worked with some natural building companies here in town recently. He and I worked together. Jim Gale, tomorrow morning we'll have Jim Gale. He's a pretty famous permaculture promoter. His company Food Forest Abundance is producing essentially permaculture master plans as well as permaculture landscape installations, and they've already done projects in over 50 countries. So a really amazing guy who's also a self-made millionaire by the time he was 30, and he's put a lot of his energy and wealth into promoting permaculture. So that's wonderful. And then the main permaculture teacher coming through tomorrow is Larry Santoyo. Many years of experience as a permaculture designer and teacher. He's just such a dynamic, wonderful guy. He was my first permaculture teacher in 2004, was it? And yeah, along with Toby Hemingway. And yeah, Earth Flow Design, Larry Santoyo is an awesome guy. And then also my other friend, Caitlin Leck, who was also a student with Larry at that same workshop in 2004, went on to study at the Bullocks Brothers Farm, and she's now the food system team coordinator for San Juan County. She lives on Orcas Island and has over 15 years experience as a farmer and gardener, permaculture designer. And then Anthony Dente is going to come through a little later on, not tomorrow. And he's also a licensed engineer. He's a structural engineer at Verdant Structural Engineers. He works almost exclusively with natural buildings at this point. So he's really influential in helping to write some of the codes and get a lot of these alternative buildings, natural buildings, passed through permitting by using engineering. So Anthony Dente is a great guy. He's also a good friend of Tyler. He's here today, and Tyler introduced me. So thanks for that. And then probably the most famous person who's going to guest speak with us about the bioarchitecture is Dan Winter, who's sort of the ringleader of the bioarchitects group that I've joined. And Dan Winter is an author and really one of the top theoretical physicists and electrical engineers in the world, in my opinion. Very grounded in the physics. So talks a lot about physics of consciousness. We'll definitely go into this in great detail. Arturo Ponce de Leon, he's one of the architects in the bioarchitect group. He's also an author, an engineer, educator, and a psychologist. He's actually married to Lydia de Gayan, and Lydia de Leon is the co-author of that Power of Sacred Location book that I told you about. Lydia is an expert in temple design and ancient temples and sacred location on the earth and the ley lines and all that. So they're a dynamic duo. So we're really lucky to have Arturo come through. Michael Rice, another member of the bioarchitects group that I'm involved with. He's with Zem Design. He's just a wonderful architect. He's an author and has designed hundreds of homes and really interesting use of sacred geometry and form. Just a very, very talented architect. And Ahmed Wafiq, he's a professor and he actually teaches at the Parsons School of Design, and he's researching into how electromagnetic radiation affects people in the buildings, and then also into what's called biogeometry, which is a method invented by Dr. Ibrahim Karim that can harmonize the harmful effects of EMS. So Ahmed Wafiq will come through. Mikey Lovdell is another friend of ours going way back here in Oregon. He's a timber framer and really into natural plasters, and he's definitely got a lot of insights about, the structural part, the framing. He's going to come through. Ramon Agurre Morales, I really hope he does come through. I'm not sure if he's going to have time. He's very, very busy, but he's a very famous and influential architect working almost exclusively with earthen building, adobe construction, a lot of adobe vaults and domes out of Oaxaca. And he runs a event called Return to Earth that is Volver a Tierra, that's in Mexico. And I think it happened just a couple weeks ago this year. So hopefully he'll come through. There'll be Manny will translate for Ramon and for Jordy, who only speaks Spanish. So that'll be interesting. Aircrete Harry is a good friend of mine. We met and worked together through a private group of natural builders called the Inventors Corner. And he's a YouTuber and just really sharing a lot of great knowledge on YouTube about aircrete. He works with thin shell domes and building thin shell concrete with air forms. So there's a lot of insights there. Portland cement and concrete generally haven't been something that I've promoted, but when I understood exactly what he was doing, I realized, there's a lot of important information there that we can use. And Harry's great. He's helped out a lot. And Jordi Domènech is a world famous Catalan vault builder from Barcelona, Spain, who I studied with last fall, just briefly. And he's hopefully going to have time and come through and give us a short presentation about his work. Catalan vaults being thin shell, thin tile vaults. So multiple bricks placed end to end and glued together with cement, and they're just super long lasting, very efficient use of materials. One of the best solutions that I've found. My story is, like I said, I came out of college and then I just started I took a cob workshop with Yanto Evans from Cobb Cottage Company and just started building right away. I built some pretty large houses out of cob straight away, when I was 20. And and the rest is history, And so, I'm self-taught essentially. I'm self-taught bioarchitect, and I've just been putting together over many years as I teach workshops every year for the last 23 years, what I feel is the most effective for people to learn and apply, and then also what I want to see when I eventually get to build my own house. So I help people with their designs, and I pick up little pieces of information all along the way to share with you guys as well. So yeah, I mean, like I said, I took permaculture workshops. I taught permaculture workshops in India and Laos. I went to urban agriculture conferences. I worked on farms, all that, and then also done a lot of natural building. I kind of decided that I didn't want to just do one particular material and one technique. I wanted to understand all the materials, all the composites, the different mixtures, and be able to kind of draw on different, pattern languages, different vocabulary for different circumstances, situations. So yeah, just moving forward, my vision is to create a world that we apply design and homes that are regenerative, self-sufficient, cooperative, ecological, affordable, non-harming, right? That's what ahimsa is, and that have soul. And in so doing, we're also giving ourselves ensoulment, like in a literal way, not just poetically. There's actually ensoulment involved in a building that breathes life and breathes energy and electrical energy. My take is like, what does the world need right now? We need a true economic base. What does it mean to have an economy or to economize? What does that even mean? Doesn't that mean something that's efficient? To economize, what does nature do? It economizes. Everything gets done, and that nothing's in a hurry. All the flowers open, but not by force. So, and I just want you to have that happiness that I feel, from the fulfillment from intense study and play. I mean, we could call it work, but we could also just say, hey, it's actually play. Sometimes we call them tools, but sometimes we call them toys, right? So again, blending, sort of the creative side and then the practical side, right? And then making sure that we're in alignment with our hearts ethically. And